Marie Antoinette. You've probably heard the name, right? But what if I told you that most of what we think we know about her is probably wrong? Today, we're going to dig into the real story of history's most infamous queen.
So what's the real deal here? Was she just a clueless teenager, totally trapped in a world she couldn't understand? Or was she really the villain everyone made her out to be? The one who basically lit the fuse of a revolution? Let's find out.
All right, so to really get a handle on her story, we're going to follow her entire journey. We'll start with her as a princess, see her life as a queen, and follow it all the way to her final days as a prisoner on trial for her life.
Okay, so our story kicks off in Austria. This is where Marie Antoinette was born, and not just into any family. We're talking about the Habsburgs, one of the most powerful royal families in all of Europe.
I mean, can you even imagine that? At just 14 years old, she's told she has to leave her home, her family, everything she knows to go marry the future king of France? And this wasn't some fairy tale romance, not at all. It was pure politics. The whole point was to create an alliance between Austria and France, two countries that had basically been enemies for ages.
So her new husband, this guy Louis Auguste, had a special title, the Dauphin. Sounds pretty fancy, right? All it really means is that he was the heir, the next in line to be king. And that, of course, put Marie Antoinette on a direct path to becoming the Queen of France.
And her new home? Wow. We're talking about the Palace of Versailles. It was this absolutely incredible world of over-the-top luxury. But as she was about to find out, it was also kind of a golden cage, with some seriously strict rules.
You see, life at Versailles was weird. On one hand, she's surrounded by all this gold and silk, but on the other, she had absolutely zero privacy. I mean, people were watching her all the time. Her entire day, from the moment she woke up to the moment she went to sleep, was basically a public performance. It's no surprise she felt totally trapped and lonely. So, to get away from it all, she found an escape at this little private estate on the palace grounds called the Petite Trianon.
But when she wasn't in the public eye, she was a really devoted mom to her 4 kids. Her life, though, was also filled with some really deep sadness. She actually lost 2 of her children when they were very young. People close to her said that this heartbreak really changed her. It made her more serious, especially as she started to face not just her own grief, but the huge problems bubbling up all across France.
And believe me, those problems were getting really serious. The public, well, they were never huge fans of hers to begin with, mostly because she was from Austria. But things were about to get a whole lot worse.
Okay, so here's the situation. France was flat broke. The government had spent a ton of money, partly by helping out with the American Revolution. On top of that, bad harvests meant there wasn't enough food, and people couldn't even afford a loaf of bread. But while regular people were literally starving, the royal court just kept on living this incredibly luxurious life. And you know who became the face of all that excess? Marie Antoinette. She was just such an easy target for all that anger.
But the real, deep-down problem was the tax system. It was completely, ridiculously unfair. Here's how it worked. The regular people, the Third Estate, they paid pretty much all of the taxes. And the rich, the nobility, the clergy, they paid next to nothing. As you can imagine, this created a huge amount of anger.
So people started calling her Madame Deficit, blaming her for the country's money problems. Now, was her spending really the issue? Not even close. It was a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the country's huge debt. But that nickname, it stuck. It painted this perfect picture for an angry public. A greedy queen, living it up while everyone else suffered.
And then, as if things weren't bad enough, this totally bizarre scandal happens. It's called the Affair of the Diamond Necklace. Basically, some swindlers forged her signature to buy this ridiculously expensive necklace. She was completely innocent, had nothing to do with it. But did the public believe her? Nope. For them, it was just more proof that she was sneaky and wasteful. After that, her reputation was pretty much destroyed.
So you've got all this anger, all this debt, all this scandal. It was basically a ticking time bomb. And in 1789, it finally went off.
And once things started, they moved so fast. First, the people created their own government, the National Assembly. Then, on July 14th, a mob stormed the Bastille prison, a huge symbol of the king's power. A few months later, a crowd led by women actually marched all the way to Versailles. They forced the entire royal family to pack up and move to Paris, where they were pretty much held as prisoners in their own palace.
The royal family made one last, desperate attempt to get out. They disguised themselves, snuck out of Paris, and tried to flee the country. But they were caught in a small town called Vienna, right near the border, and that was it. Any tiny bit of trust that was left, gone. To the revolutionaries, this was undeniable proof that the king and queen were traitors, trying to run away and get other countries to invade France and restore their power.
Yeah, after that failed escape, there was just no going back. The revolution took a much harder, more radical turn. Any hope of finding a middle ground was totally gone. So, in 1792, the monarchy was officially abolished. France was now a republic. The whole royal family was stripped of their titles. Think about that. They went from being King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette to just Citizen Louis and Antoinette Capet. And they were moved out of the palace and into this dark old prison called the Temple. Meanwhile, there's this new machine that's becoming the talk of Paris, the guillotine. It was actually designed to be a more humane way to execute people, but it very quickly became this terrifying symbol of the whole revolution, especially during its most violent and bloody phase, which we now call the Reign of Terror.
And in January of 1793, the former king was put on trial for treason. He was found guilty, and he was executed by the guillotine in front of a huge crowd. Just like that, Marie Antoinette was a widow, locked away in prison with her daughter, and she just knew that it was only a matter of time before they came for her.
And when her trial finally came, it was a total sham. I mean, the verdict was a foregone conclusion. They accused her of everything you can imagine: bankrupting the country, high treason, even completely false and horrible personal rumors. But by all accounts, she stayed calm and defended herself with a lot of dignity. Of course, it made no difference. She was found guilty on all charges.
On October 16, 1793, they put her in an open cart, not a fancy carriage, but a common cart for criminals, and drove her through the streets of Paris, while crowds screamed at her. She showed incredible composure right to the very end. There's even a story that she accidentally stepped on her executioner's foot, and her last words were an apology to him. Then, just like her husband, her life ended at the guillotine. Which brings us right back to our original question, doesn't it? Marie Antoinette, victim or villain? Was she this out-of-touch monster who deserved everything she got? Or was she really just a victim of circumstance? A teenager thrown into a political mess at the worst possible time in history, completely caught in a storm she had no way of controlling. The truth is, historians still debate it. And the answer? Well, it's probably somewhere in between.